Hi, all. Welcome to yet another Koot podcast series where we discuss global tech adoption trends, global SaaS adoption trends with global industry leaders. And today we have a very special guest, a forward thinking HR leader, Ms. Rashmi Nair, who was heading the country head HR at Lumen Technologies and more than 2 decades of experience in the HR leadership. She was also one of the top 50 India HR, honorees by Business World. So let's welcome Rashmi. Rashmi, thank you so much for joining us. I've been listening to you in the, NASCOM GCC event and always wished you having in our podcast. And see, we are here. Thank you so much for joining in, Rashmi.
My pleasure, Nageshri. Looks like you've manifested the desire. So, yes, here we are, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with you.
Absolutely, Rashmi. I'm looking forward to learn a lot of strategies and insights out of this podcast. Let me start. You've been in Microsoft in across different industries, right? Biotech, retail, and telecom and IT, right? So let's start with your latest journey with human technologies. Phenomenal, right? You were able to scale it up. You were part of the organization when it scaled up to 3,000 plus headcounts. So could you just share your journey initially? How was it? I'm sure it was not an easy task. So how was it initially, and what were the initial challenges that you went through? If you could share a couple of instances also, Rashmi.
Absolutely, I'd love to, and especially because it's very recent and very close to my heart. So, Lumen, I joined in 2021, and that's about 4 years back. And when I joined this organization, Nageshwari, to put it very subtly, our process tool systems relationships were all sort of broken,
Mm.
to put it very subtly. So for me, it was a world of opportunity that was ahead of me. Right? Like you could dip into your experiences, you could go back to everything that you've learned in your 20 years across, like you rightly mentioned, Microsoft, Thomson Reuters, Thermo Fisher Scientific, all great organization, and see what you could bring around to this organization and bring about a meaningful change, right? And I often tell this to people that, from harmonizing systems and processes to bringing in global tools and collaboration to creating locally relevant progressive people practices, my team and I in Lumen actually lived the HR transformation era. We went from 0 to 100 in that particular 4 years. We kind of converted and turned around our compliances from red to green. We got around a way to harmonize our systems and tools so that your comp process, your PMD processes are aligned to the global practices. We brought about some very progressive people strategies and practices that's relevant to Indian market. Whether
Mm.
it's about inclusion, diversity, hiring, retention, a hybrid work model, things that's very relevant to the region. We kind of brought those things as well into here. And a lot of those practices and stuff yielded very significant results. Our attritions came down from 30% to single digit,
Mm.
sustained for a very, very long time. Our pay equity went from -18 to sort of +1%. Our source mix and cost per hire actually decreased, by the quality of hires improved. The employee experience was central to what we did, right? So whether we are responding to queries or resolving for employee situations and demands, we kind of saw a really good shift in NPS. Our talent development practices really led to doubling women leadership, over the 4 years that I was there. We had 100% maternity return rate. So a whole bunch of tangible outcome is something that we saw in here. And to your question of
Yeah.
how did we go about doing those pieces? I think first is you have to be very clear about what you want to achieve. You want to understand the business priorities. You want to understand where the organization is going. You also need to be very deeply rooted in culture and operating principles. So when you're achieving these pieces, how are you achieving those pieces is very important. So Lumen has something called as Lumen 8 behaviors, right? Whether it's growth mindset or customer obsession in HR terms, that's employee focus, right? Or finding for solutions, or simple aspects of you work as a team, you have transparency, you build trust, you respect each other. I think these core operating principles were central themes to whatever we did. whatever we built as processes and systems were around these operating principles. And that's usually where you lean into when you have just too many things to sort of conquer, right? So, long story short, I think challenges in my terms are opportunities. That's one thing that you can make a difference in, and I had plenty of that in the last 4 years that I was with Lumen.
No, no, that's awesome, Rashmi. But take us little bit, initially, how was the setup? I think it was less than 100 is what you.
It wasn't less than 100. It was close to about 2,000 people. We grew by
Okay.
about 50% in that year. But what we also need to understand is it comes as a mixed bag, right? You have
Hmm.
some amount of diverse teachers that's happening. You have some amount of attrition that's happening. You have some amount
Yeah.
of net growth that's happening. And in 2021, 2022, we had attrition close to about 30%, right? So the churn was really high. So for my team, there was a huge amount of uplift that you have to do in terms of hiring and integrating those people into the system, right? So while at the end
Hmm.
of 4 years, you would see it going from 2,000 to 3,000, you basically also have a journey of backfilling. You also have a journey of letting go of some teams. You also
Hmm.
have journeys of diverse teachers. So all of that put together has been a journey where I feel that the team and I had contributed
Had a.
to 50% of that organization in the shape or form that it is right now.
Sure, sure. No, that is opening up to so many questions. Maybe to the talent and the team building, I'll go a little later, Rashmi. But let me come. You put up a very interesting, point which is coming around to branding, right? Because when you're growing like from 2000 to 3000, obviously you're also backboning. So Lumen, may not be a very, renowned. So how did you overcome that?
It's a good question. It's an interesting one because if you go back to my LinkedIn page and you
Okay.
scroll through, you will see that my first post was after I joined Lumen. It's not like LinkedIn was in existence only for the last 4 years. It's been there
Mm.
forever.
Yeah.
My journey has been there for 2 decades plus. But there was a specific need to position yourself in the market at Lumen, which I did not have in my previous organization, right?
Mm.
Microsoft,
Microsoft.
well-known brand, Thomson Reuters, well-known brand, Thermo Fisher, $30 billion well-known brand. What happened with Lumen was it was previously CenturyLink, and CenturyLink was in existence in India. If you would go and talk about CenturyLink, people understood what we're talking about.
Okay.
CenturyLink acquired Level 3, and then there was a rebranding exercise in 2020, and the new merged entity was renamed as Lumen. Now, to make matters more complicated in India, there are three companies registered as Lumen Technologies, right? And one
Mm.
of the companies had like some 30,000 followers, and we had like what 1,500 as followers in our corporate brand. I'm talking about the India handle, okay, not
Mm.
Lumen Technologies global handle. So when my team was tasked with ensuring A, you retain people, and B, you attract a lot of people, we're seeing offer declines of 30%. You have a churn of 30%, and then you have conflicting brand presence. You're left with no choice but to like sort of go all out as a leader to create awareness about your organization, right? So
Mm.
branding was a core part and responsibility of what I did, to
Mm.
like you met me in NASCOM event. There are people who saw me in Jumbe event. There are people who saw me in Zinov event. So when you have to go there, you go there and represent your organization. That's one part of it, right? And we kind of effectively have been doing that. The other part also is about leveraging your own employees to be the brand ambassador. If all 3,000 people become the brand ambassadors for you, if they have a connection with the organization, if they understand the mission, they understand the purpose, if they are able to rattle out what we are doing as an organization, they will speak to 10 other people in their family and network. So
Mm.
we also
Mm.
leveraged a lot of internal employees and resources and kept pushing, kept bringing them up to speed with what's the company doing, what are the financials looking like, how are we going to disrupt the market, what's new coming in. That was a conscious effort as well to build more brand ambassadors internally, right? And then we also did a lot of other things like, we had this whole goodies given out to everybody who was having a child, not just women, even men. You have these onesies and you have these little babies wearing all of your goodies and marketing yourself out there. So we did a lot of branding initiative because at the end of the day, Nagashri, what we don't realize is the emotional sense of feeling proud of being part of an organization is a very important tool also to retain the employees.
Mm,
When an employee sees their brand out there, there is
mm,
a sense of connect and pride, and it's
mm.
important for you to invest in that very intentionally.
No, no, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Rashmi. You mentioned 30% attrition, right? What was the major cause and how did you, I'm sure it is going reducing now, but how did you overcome that then?
Actually, for the last 3 years, which was 23, 24, and till about a month back in July, the annualized attrition, the voluntary attrition, has been in single digit for Lumen, which is a
Wow.
big deal because it's not like a blip, right? For 3 years to sustain a single digit attrition in a
Mm,
competitive IT market is a very big deal.
mm,
There are multiple factors that leads to attrition, right? And there are some confidential pieces. I'm going to keep it very generic, right?
yeah.
But it's a combination factor of where the market is, what the demand looks like,
Mm,
the demand
mm,
looks like. Around 2021 and 2022, it was not just Lumen. The whole industry faced something called
yeah.
great resignation, right? The connection with the organization, the connection with culture was very broken, because people started getting more and more isolated in their little box. Everything was just
Mm,
a job, a 9 to 5. You pay me a little extra, I'm going to go there. You have a better
mm,
work from home policy, I'm going to go there, right? And there were even people doing moonlighting and a whole bunch of things just opened up between 21 and 22. So Lumen was not an anomaly. It was part of that whole trend of global resignations or the mass resignations that were happening.
mm.
We got intentional though. We got intentional in terms of, like I was telling you, I have 100% maternity return rate for the last
Oh,
3 years. So
wow.
you're intentional about, okay, what are the things that you can fix? Is it the quality of work? Are we kind of doing work which is only outsourced to vendors, or are we creating innovation hubs and labs in the country? Are we submitting business cases? Are we adopting Copilot, GitHub, AI related projects? Are we investing in training? Are our
Mm,
policies in line, whether it is about pay equity, whether it is about leave policies? Is it simplified and easy? Is our
mm.
hybrid working model working? So we kind of got very intentional about whatever we are doing. And that, I believe, has led to the single digit.
No,
Uh,
absolutely. Great. You mentioned so many points. Let me take that one point, HR modernization, right, Rashmi? And looking at your profile, you've also had, work experience with companies like Microsoft. So obviously, you are very comfortable with the technology aspect and already in Lumen. So could you share some, some experiences that how did you, adopt to the newer technologies in HR. And because we advocate for startups, would also like to hear how was the journey of partnering with the startups in this area, Rashmi?
Honestly, I believe HR needs to be business savvy and tech savvy. You need to understand
Oh,
business and you need to understand technology. If not, you're only going to walk down that path, like the downhill path, very quickly. And
mm,
interestingly, what happens is it's very difficult to get your teams to rally unless there's an event. So let me talk
okay.
about a particular event in an example, right? So
Mm,
imagine you have a team of 10 recruiters. You have a conversion ratio of 10 to 15%, and suddenly your SVP comes to you and says, hey, you know what? I need you to roll out 200 offers in 6 weeks.
mm,
Now, with that level of conversion ratios, and if everything is manual process, there is no chance in hell that you will be able to screen through, talk to so many people and like thousands of people and land up with an offer of about 200 people. And let's not even forget the offer decline ratio and the buffers that you have to build in, right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
when you have these sort of events is when the team is primed to look at technology, and I never miss an opportunity to sort of get into there. So we had a vendor partner by the name Incruiter.
Okay.
And Incruiter has multiple offerings that they do. They kind of have interviewers on demand, and they also have conversational AI. Now, the best way to sort of keep things confidential is to leverage the confidential AI, conversational AI, right?
Yeah.
Conversational AI that Incruiter had was an amazing stuff. So you can actually create the role description, and the bot obviously gives you. There is a whole conversational AI interview that happens, and they weed out your L1 category. L1
Yeah.
where you have maximum rejections, right? So if you're able to funnel it through
Mm,
AI and conversational AI, your workload sort of comes down. Mathematically as well, for you to conduct a conversational AI interview versus leveraging your technical manager to do a 1 hour interview, mathematically, financially, this model works much better if you look at a per hour cost of your tech manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were able to leverage conversational AI from our vendor partners to sort of land those 200 offers in 6 weeks' time because there was no other way to get through this piece, right? Similarly, if you look at an era post COVID where people are completely dispersed, you are somewhere, I'm somewhere, everybody's somewhere. And conventionally, what the trainings used to be, you bring everybody to your office, you do a training, you do a mock, and then off you go, right? Today, if you try to run it on WebEx, half the people will switch off their videos and you have no idea what they're doing, whether they're browsing, whether they're listening, nothing. Switch that with a conversational AI module like a Casey AI, and you bring that piece in where if I have to train a manager for difficult conversation, the manager actually speaks to the agentic AI and is able to have conversation, practice it, mock it in the comfort of their home and still get the principles that you're trying to pass on for difficult conversation. That's the best way, right? You don't have to keep tracking attendance on WebEx. You don't have to force people to switch off the video while they're doing their own Instagram and just do a checkbox of a training, right? So there are multiple areas where technology can really help us push these HR policies and practices out and processes out, right? Because
Yeah.
the pieces around snow, around bots answering questions have been there for decades, have been there for 20 years. Now, what you have to start looking at is practically where else can you use these? And
Mm-hmm.
these are some of the examples that I have, which I can.
Yeah. No, sure, Rashmi. No, thanks a lot because, like I mentioned, our audiences, majorly the startup founders, so they would really love this piece which you have mentioned right now. Rashmi, also, one more aspect because, this is a very beautiful trend that, the GCCs and the global organizations are, moving from the mere back office to the operations, and even they're able to take the decisions and allocate budgets for such tools. So, having said that, how does, I mean, if you're choosing, one of the tools to meet the gap, then from there, could you share the journey, how what it takes to reach to the decision maker? Is the decision maker sitting right in India, or it has to go to the headquarters at the global level, Rashmi?
I believe it sort of varies from an organization to organization, right? There are organizations which empowers the India leadership, which could be the India managing director and the India head of HR, to pilot initiatives and projects for their
Yeah,
particular function and department as long as the budget constraints and the budget approvals are in place. Now,
yeah,
any financially sound organization will have budget constraints. For example, somebody might say a head of HR can approve budget up to
yeah,
$50,000 or $100,000, right? And they empower that particular person and individual to take risks, to innovate, and see if something works locally, and that gets adopted globally. There are other organizations which will probably have a certain matrix of approval that is required not only for the budget but also to look at processes because it's a highly integrated system. So if your recruitment tools and processes are global, which means all of them are using from US to, let's say, Manila to Europe to India to APAC, everybody is on Workday. Assume that's the.
yeah,
If you want to introduce a layer that has access to these workflows in the system, there is no way you can do it in isolation. You will need the sponsor to be somewhere globally to ensure you tweak the systems, right? You play around
yeah.
with factors, you play around with Workday. Whereas if you have disconnected or disjointed systems like we had in Lumen, my recruitment tools and systems are local and not global. So when you have
Okay.
local, you have a lot more flexibility to play around with the systems and the tools that you have locally. So to answer your question, there is no one single piece of every organization works like this. It really boils down to, is it a local system? Is it a global system? Is it a global
Okay.
process? Is it a local process? Is there restrictions on budgets versus taking innovation risk or not? So once you get that clarity, you make it happen. Now, irrespective of anything, I guess what the startups need to understand is they should also give a very mathematical and a financially sound solution to an organization. Like I was talking about Incruder, right?
Yeah,
I have to have a technical manager do these many interviews. Somebody should be able to extrapolate and say, this is what it will cost the company. Versus if you go with a conversational AI that's going to charge you 500 rupees per interview, this is what your cost is going to look like. most decision makers are going to look at A, is it saving time? B, is my data secure? And C, what is it going to cost me? Or what is it going
Mm.
to save me, right? If you're able to give those specifics to an organization upfront, and data security is going to be very, very key to it. If
Yeah.
you're able to provide that view, the
Mm.
chances are that the leader will take it to the next level and
Mm.
be open to assessing or trying it out. Right. But
Sure.
if you just go and say, hey, I've created the system, try it out, you'd be like, yeah, there are 100 other people doing the same thing, right?
No, absolutely.
What's
Yeah.
in it for the corporate has to come out tangibly.
Mm.
Cost, time, experience, quality, that could be any of those parameters, but that needs to sort of come out very solid.
Sure, Rashmi, but how was the things in Microsoft? Because that's a different organization altogether.
Honestly, Nageshwari, I was in Microsoft in 2004 to 2007. That's like 20 years back. So I'm not entirely certain I'm qualified to answer that question because
Okay.
like 2 decades have passed, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think you should probably touch base with someone more recent.
Sure, sure. Currently, I think they have their own cohorts for the startup. I mean, they have a team which scout outs for the startup, similar, certain operations, let's say Gen AI or AI. So they scout out for the startups and they have their own systems of partnering. But I thought of, so that time, this must not be there, right, Rashmi, during.
It's 20 years back.
Sure. Sure, Rashmi. Now, moving on to your, team building mantra, right? Because obviously you are the country headed human currently, right? I mean, at the latest of your career journey. So please tell us your team building mantra. How do you, keep the team motivated and maintaining the same culture across the organization?
Okay, I'm going to take the second part of the question first, which is how do you maintain culture throughout the organization? See, one of the things that I keep telling people is we need to be realistic about who drives it, who enables it, and who
Mm,
sustains it, right? Now,
mm,
for me, the culture driver in terms of how we need to come across as employees of an organization, what should it feel like, totally lies with the leadership, right? The global
mm,
leadership, which defines that, hey, this is how we're going to operate. Trust is important, respect is important,
mm,
integrity is important. These are the core crystallized culture and value statement. The driver comes there, right? Now, enabling and leading that often lies within HR. Now, HR is in any organization, if you look at it, Nageshwari, the HR team typically would be somewhere between 1 to 2% of the overall headcount. So,
mm,
if you have 3,000 employees in India, the HR headcount would be about 30 to 35, which is just about 1 or 1.5% of the whole headcount, right?
mm, it counts,
And
yeah.
these 30, 35 people will have to do everything from creating JD to interviewing to onboarding to payroll, training, HRBP, everything, right? So these are the team members who will give you tools and processes and enable a culture to come to life through various formats, right?
Mm,
It could be conversations, it could be enablement sessions, it could be just debriefing sessions. They can enable that culture fabric to sort of go downstream. But the sustenance and actual implementation lies with managers and leaders across the layer, right? And for me, from my perspective, and I tell this to everyone, you need to tap into that management layer for you to effectively articulate and communicate what culture feels like, what team building and teamwork feels like, and for that to remain sustained. Because you would have one manager leading 16 people, and you'd have one HR with 1,000 head span, right? So
mm,
there is absolutely no way that one individual can influence 1,000. The one individual can go to that one manager and enable that person to sustain or to kind of articulate what is expected from a culture and integration standpoint. So for me, when you look at culture for an organization, leveraging the management and leadership layer is super critical. Otherwise, you cannot execute or sustain it. Right. The second piece is how do you build a team? For me, attitude and character comes first. Everything else like skills and everything is trainable. But if you don't get the right attitude, for example, or if you get like someone who doesn't integrate very well with the team, the downslide starts, the cracks start, the friction starts. So getting the right attitude and right people within my team is super critical for me. For example, because HR sometimes gets mocked so much, is constantly like I said, 1 or 2% and 3,000, right? And you have to do a whole bunch of things that people don't even see. They don't see the behind the scenes effort. They only see the final product and say this is trash or this is great. But the behind the scenes efforts are not seen. So a lot of HR sometimes are frustrated and are defensive. So if any employee comes in, the defense mechanism kicks in, right? And
Yeah.
to change that defense to collaboration, to respect, to being focused on, hey, can we resolve a particular situation? Takes a lot of empathy. You also have multi-generational people, right? Like there are kids who are in my team who are 22 and I have 23 years of experience. So they have younger than my total years of experience. So you have multi-generational people. So how do you stay empathetic? How do you stay relevant? How do you develop and groom them? Um, all comes down to their attitudes and what kind of people you get in. So for me, the team building part starts with who's in my team, uh,
Mm.
and then it goes from there.
No, absolutely. This is opening up to one more question, Rashmi. So you mentioned you have to talk to your top management, and I think that is the reason why you mentioned that even when the startups are approaching, they have to be very clear with their ROI and very clear with the numbers, so that because to the management numbers speak more clearer. Uh, I get that. How did you balance this conversation? At one end, you need to speak to the management. At the other end, you have to communicate to the team members, and at the same time you were also playing an HRBP role, so you get the business objectives from top management and make sure that they are following on day-to-day basis. So how was that whole journey, and could you share some of the instances where you went back to the management and maybe communicated some of the issues which the line managers were undergoing, Rashmi?
So let me try and see if I got your questions right. How do I communicate or negotiate something
Yeah.
for the team,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So a few things, right? In my experience, what I've understood is you need to be able to give perspective in the first 2 or 3 minutes. If you're talking to a CEO, if you're talking to C-suite level folks, right? And if
Yeah.
you're having a conversation, you cannot go with, hey, you know what, the Bangalore traffic is really bad, so I think we should stick to 1 day of work from home. It's going to get trashed, right? You need to be able to provide a very clear perspective, and whether you like it or not, it needs to be balanced. Needs to be balanced in employee well-being. It needs to be balanced in culture. It needs to be about why we are doing what we are doing, right? Let me take divestiture as an example. If someone's trying to do a divestiture, you're not only looking for, okay, which vendor gives me or which partner gives me the best rates, right? You're also looking at the employee well-being. If there are 300 people moving from my organization to another organization through a rebadging, what kind of policies, process, and support mechanism those vendors have. So when I do an RFP of, let's say, 3 people, I'm going to not only look at whether person A is giving me the maximum money, B is giving. So it's not an L1 tender, to put it like
Yeah.
that, right? Your pitch to the senior leadership has to be, hey, this is probably L2, but in this L2, this is where my employee well-being stands. And this is where probably the price point stands. So it's a win-win for both us and the 300 people that we are divesting to another organization, right? So your conversations have to be rooted in, okay, what's our culture, value, operating principle? How do we want to kind of treat our people, and so on and so forth, right? Then there are some cutthroat decisions as well, Nageshri, and the world knows it. For example, if you're having a layoff. Now, if you're having a riff or a layoff, the question is that happening because you need to reduce the headcount in the operating margin forever, or are you looking at a short-term goal? If you're looking at a short-term goal of an OPEX for 1 year, then you look at what's your CPH, what's your retrenchment cost, right? And you kind of balance out and do the math and figure out whether it makes more sense to cross-train or whether you need to let go of people. So your conversations have to be, what are you trying to solve?
Okay.
How are you going to solve? What's in it for the employees, what's in it for the organization, what's in it for our customers, what's in it for our shareholders. There are some basic principles that you outline, and then you take your conversation there. You never go to a leadership team and say, hey, you know what, I think, like I said, traffic is bad, so we need to just do 1 day work from home, or those won't fly. It just doesn't make sense. Or I want to increase somebody's salary because I like that person. That won't work. Or my managers don't want to do a PIP because they do not want to do a difficult conversation. That doesn't work. Or I'm not going to terminate this person because I'm struggling to do a difficult conversation. Those things don't work, right? Or I want to give 30 days of leaves because what my people are burned out. Like that all that won't fly. You need to like truly bring it down to some ROI conversations.
No, very beautiful, structured thinking, right, Rashmi? So even coming down to now, the governance and compliances, right? You were able to, change it from red to green. So if you could share some of the, journey of creating beautiful SOPs and, workflows, Rashmi.
The thing that I keep telling people is compliance should be a top priority for every HR leader and for every India managing director. To my utter surprise here, it just slipped through the cracks and slipped quite badly. And the reasons are multiple, right? While I'm not going to get into the reasons, the things that I believe has worked for us to sustain it in green is one, you need to have a BCP and not a single person handling compliance. When you have just one person managing compliance, whether it is one vendor or one person at your end, there is no BCP, there's no fallback. There's a medical emergency, it's gone through. There's an oversight, it's gone through. So
Mm.
creating a clear BCP plan for the individual handling compliance is super important. Second, like you mentioned, everything has to be SOP, right? What is it
Yeah.
that you're trying to do? What we also did was we leveraged technology because if used, tech can be your friend, right? So a Power App is a beautiful tool in which you list out everything from your shops and establishment licenses. When is it due for expiry? What are your muster rolls? When is it due for checks, Clara licenses, or any of those pieces, right? You list out all your compliances. You list out all the due dates, which takes the first day of the month or the first month of the year to put in all the due dates. And what the system does, or what the tool does, is it sends out reminders to the people who are responsible to sort of file it 2 weeks in advance. So there's a reminder, there is a subsequent reminder that goes in. And every month it sends out a notification to the head of the department saying that, hey, you know what, these many have been completed and filed and these many are pending. That gives you a very good opportunity to go back and check if something has been missed, what has been missed, and what needs to be done to fix the problem, right? So
Sure.
tech is a great thing instead of you relying on an Excel sheet and someone manually tracking it.
No, absolutely.
Leverage technology. A lot of vendors also provide compliance tools and systems where you don't have to develop your own Power App. All you
Mm.
have to do is they have a pre-required suite of the registration. Based on your registration, they'll tell you these are the 100 compliances that you're supposed to do. This is your due date, and it starts shooting it.
Shooting the notifications
Right.
and
If you have
reminder.
a budget, I would highly recommend people to invest in those. Like eBay has a great system as well. So if you have the budget, go for a compliance partner. If you don't have the budget, leverage internal Power App to send you automated responses. But a long and short of it is you might have the best recruitment systems, but if your SNE license is expired, nothing else matters.
No, absolutely, Rashmi. Now, you also mentioned, one question before this, the Gen Zs, right? So, what has been your experience with the Gen Zs? And is there any instances of reverse mentoring where they have suggested something because they are adapting to the AI and Gen AI quite faster than millennials? And have you taken their, inputs to the senior management, Rashmi?
Absolutely. One of the things that we have been very actively doing, especially for instance, women, is university relations and bringing in more early talent. We had a very clear, intentional early talent strategy. So about 5 years back, we used to do a lot of off campuses, just like pick up people and based on the needs and availability, you just hire fresh graduates, right? We turned that around into a proper early talent program where you approach universities, you have hackathons that's running,
Yeah.
very structured process to bring in people. And for the last 2 years or so, we've got like 100 odd interns. 95% of them get converted as FTs. So we have a very clear early talent piece. And what we observed is all of these bunch of people, they come in with behaviors that's very suited for today, right? They're very curious. they're very courageous. They
Yeah.
don't shy away from asking a question, irrespective of whether they're talking to the head of HR or the head of Lumen overall. So they've had sessions with our CEO, with our CHR,
Oh,
and you understand that they're very courageous. They don't hold back. They're not fearful of judgment. So these are some of the traits that all of us want to pick up at some point, right?
yeah,
So there are a lot of good attitude that they bring in, and like you mentioned, they're also very tech friendly.
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily call tech savvy. There's a route to go, but they're very tech friendly. They're not so afraid of, or at least in my little experience, they're not highly spooked by this whole AI conversation as much as somebody who's in their 40s. Uh,
yeah,
Someone who's in their 40s are a little bit more spooked because probably they still have that aptitude to get back into a classroom and learn it.
yeah.
So we have the AI Academy piece, right, for the beginners, intermediate, and advanced. So I think their aptitude to learn is
Hmm.
still there. It's still fresh. Whereas somebody who's in the mid 40s or the 50s have already crossed that stage of picking up a new technology, right? So I
Absolutely.
guess some of those pieces work in their favor. And if we are able to tap into that resource and inspire the rest of the organization, absolutely should.
Sure, sure, Rashmi. And now moving on, just a moment.
Sure.
Just a moment. I'll just. No, very well said, Rashmi. This is the same trait which I have been hearing from the HR leaders also, other senior HR leaders from the other GCCs also. There's a lot of reverse mentoring, and they're very open, and they don't ask about the salary initially. They ask what is the project, and they are already aware of the projects which they want to take. They're already asking so many questions around the project during the interview itself.
They're very curious to even understand what's the culture. I remember I getting questions around what's your take on DEI after Trump
Hmm.
signed that particular order. I had questions around, okay, there are AI courses, should I be picking up another skill or a language because I've specialized only in AI. They're very curious about what career looks like. They're very, and most importantly, like I said, there is a certain amount of confidence. I remember back in 2002 when I started working, if you put me in a room and there is a leader, there is no chance I would have opened my mouth. So, I think the world has changed where they feel more confident. They're very honest, and we all need to sort of pick up those traits. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wonderful to see them come into the industry.
No, absolutely. Well said, Rashmi. Now, moving on, actually you preempted, you already answered, but some part I want to go deep into how you said that, one agenda itself was to get the, fresh talents. So what was the initial strategy, Rashmi, especially the Lumen, where you kind of, did you have an internal team which used to go to the in campuses? Or
We have a proper university relations team, and I'll tell you what, a lot of people do it as a checkbox. For us, it was a clear strategy, right? You're looking at two parts of it, right? If you continue to hire lateral people from the market, how do you groom and grow your internal folks? For example, if somebody leaves it an associate manager and I go and get that associate manager from outside, then how is this person going to grow up, right? Now, if this
yeah,
person grows up and then you cascade it downstream, it creates an opportunity at the entry level. So the strategy was also to allow for internal growth to happen. And let's assume you have an attrition of about 10%, right?
yeah,
Bring 7% of it at the level that you're losing. But the 3%, if you plug that in with early talent, that gives you an opportunity to have internal mobility upwards for 3% of your population, right? That
sure.
eventually then helps you retain employees. So it was a very
Okay.
thought through strategy around helping your internal employees groom while you infuse fresh talent. And like I said, and infusing this fresh talent also brought in a lot of benefits for the organization, right? Like
Hmm.
your attitude, you're more in tune, you learn something from them, and they also stay for a minimum of 3 to 4 years. So you get that whole piece. In fact, I've had people in Lumen who joined as campus hires and been there for like 8, 10 years. There's one
Yeah.
of the team members that I had in my team. She joined as a campus hire, been there for about 6 years. One of the best performing people that I had in my team, 6 years down, and she's someone I'll hire in a heartbeat. I'm not going to name her, but she knows who she is. But I'd hire her in a heartbeat. Very, very talented people. So it works
Oh,
all fronts. It works for existing employees, it works for the organization, it works as a strategy.
great, great, Rashmi. Now, maybe we are going, heading towards the end of the podcast. Normally, this question I ask to most of our guests. Would like to ask to you also, Rashmi. The second last question. What are some of the lessons learned? Because you are an HR veteran with so much plethora of experience. So, what are the lessons learned, and what is your, routine, everyday routine? How are you balancing, your hobbies and your work, Rashmi?
Okay, so some of the lessons that I've learned is the first one, culture is super important for an organization. I mean, it's when people say, culture eats strategy for a breakfast, it's actually true. If you're in stress, if you're in a very deep problem, the thing that will get you out of it is culture and the attitude of people that you have. So one of the lessons is invest in culture, right? The
Okay.
second lesson that I have learned is also invest in a culture of learning. So there has to be deep investment in not only tech skills development, but also other professional development, as an individual, as a leader, as an employee. So investment in continuing to grow people is very important. When you stop learning, you are making yourself redundant, right? So your employee base shouldn't be pushed into the classroom, right? They should automatically feel like, hey, this is the list. I need to attend these three things because that's going to help me and my organization. So creating a culture of learning is what will keep the employees hooked to the organization, continuously relevant to the organization relevant to the times as well. The third learning is multi-generation is real. 20 years back, probably the whole GCC, BPO, IT, everything was booming in India. So it was
Yeah.
still like a particular type of people that you hired. That was in 90s and early 2000s, right? But now multi-generational is real. So you have to have your workplace policies that is empathetic to differing needs of your organization, right? So empathy and agility has to be there in every leader. If you become too rigid in your ways of working, you risk breaking down, right? And the last piece is that we have already started pivoting GCCs from cost arbitrage to value centers.
Yeah.
And no one's going to hand out anything to you in a platter. If you want global roles, if you want people to take notice, you've got to create those opportunities for yourself, right?
Yeah.
These are some of the learnings that I believe I've had recently.
Sure. Any recent books that reading? Yeah.
I have a lot of books, but right now I am reading something called as Emperors of All Maladies.
Okay.
It's a book by Siddhartha Mukherjee. It's the biography of cancer. It's how they detected cancer. So it's a very science
Sure.
book.
Sure, sure, sure. And the last, your one advice to the aspiring, the startup founders, the entrepreneurs, and the intrapreneurs who are looking forward partnering with large, organizations, Rashmi.
So I think one of my advice would be you should probably research. So a lot of people approach HR leaders in India MD saying, "Hey, I know that you are hiring. Let me give you a solution." No, nobody needs. There is a set of vendors already, right? You need to create a differentiating factor, saying, "Hey, you know what? There's a product that I've been building on in this particular piece, and this is what it has done for three other people, and this is how we would probably add value to you." Like I said, there has to be a very clear articulation of A, what do you bring to the table as specialization and product? B, what will it do for the company in terms of cost, time, effort, etc. And C is stop generalizing it. So if you're reaching out to somebody, it has to be very specific and tailor made to that particular organization. Random calls don't work. Calling up people in the middle of their day and disturbing their meetings is only going to put you off, right? No one's going to look at you because, like, I'm having a conversation with you, somebody gives me a call, it'll only annoy me because it's broken my trail of thought, right? So
Yeah.
cold calling doesn't work anymore. Most of the people will hang up on you. Right? Random generic emails also won't work. The one area where you can really make a pitch is to have booths in these Zinov conferences, or NASCOM events, approaching people through these roundtables, because there you have a FaceTime.
Face to face, yeah.
Create brochures that truly is customized to a client or a segment that you're trying to work out for. Those might potentially work. Rest, like I said, you hire some bunch of smart salesy guys and they should get the job done for you.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. Thanks a lot, Rashmi. That's a wonderful piece of advice. You banged on, the certain points and really, great insights. Rashmi, overall, the entire podcast, I really love the podcast. And I look forward to be in touch with you in the future as well. And maybe, we are also writing a book, like I mentioned, which is focused on the GCC and the large enterprises on the GTM and the partnership. Would like to hear some insights from the book aspect also, Rashmi.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that, Nageshwari. Thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation and I look forward to staying linked as well.
Absolutely, Rashmi. Thank you.
Thank you.